In this video, we're going to go back to covering some of the live abroad territories that we used to cover back in the day. So we're going to revisit some of these live abroad in this video that we haven't been doing because there's important whoppers. Hey, welcome to Retire Early Lifestyle, where we talk about all the current events that affect our retire early lifestyle, whether at home or abroad. And speaking of abroad, just to give you a background, we started this channel originally as a travel vlogging, and we came to understand that the retire abroad media was giving people a sort of glitzy view of things, and we wanted to present a balanced view of what it was really like. We've had so many things that affect our retire early lifestyle that we feel they're important enough to share our perspective with you on them, and one of them is like we spent 8 years in Ecuador, and apparently the crime rates are now so out of control. And I bring this up, here's the reason I bring this up. The crime rates are so out of control that the Cuencanos, the people in Cuenca, Ecuador, which is the city that's mostly promoted in Ecuador, although all of the coast and everything's promoted, it's supposed to be the safest part of Ecuador, but now the locals, the Cuencanos, are actually protesting in the streets. They're protesting the crime rates. The crime rates have gotten so bad. We spent 8 years there, but then we did some traveling around the world, and then we went back a couple of years ago and we made some videos about the crime rates. A lot of times these kinds of subjects are not well received. You've got situations where the Facebook groups brag about how many thousands of people are in their Ecuador groups, and yet this kind of information seems to kind of be conveniently swept under the rug. And when people are protesting the crime rates, for example, there was a shooting on the coast . And I bring you guys whoppers. I call them whoppers because it's a big deal. A lot of times the whopper aspect of the conversation is not completely clear, so I want to be clear that the way I choose my whoppers is something that stands out about that subject in an untypical way. And the untypical way that promoting these places like Ecuador is done is that a lot of these things that are swept under the rug, and then the conversation also morphs into other whoppers such as human rights or being able to own guns and all of the things that
that's important for retirement.
We talk about at home, but are also important when we go abroad. You know, they're not only important when we go home because we make our new home somewhere else. A lot of us, you know, spending 8 years somewhere, you made that place your home. We even have granddaughters
and a new grandson.
We have granddaughters and a grandson that were born there, are Ecuadorians, and daughter-in-law and this kind of thing. So we have a connection to these places. And so it's important to talk about it. The crime is getting so out of hand. It's not that on the coast there were people that were so, the crimes are so violent and brazen that they're not even covering their faces or anything, and they're coming into a restaurant and just shooting everybody. And I'm thinking to myself, somebody that was a little bit across the street with a phone got that. They got a video of it. They can't see everybody in the restaurant, but they can see the perpetrators in the entrance shooting away. And the reason I bring it up is because the Ecuadorian president was recently criticized for wanting to pass a law to allow the citizens to have guns and to maybe openly carry guns or defend themselves, because that's one thing about Ecuador. They always like to say, oh, you can buy guns in Ecuador. Sure, but I've talked to plenty of locals when we were down there, because things are constantly changing, that'll tell you, sure, you own a gun, but you can't defend yourself with it because you'll end up in court and maybe even jail. And so the thought that comes to my mind, because there's a debate also in Ecuador about this, being able to defend oneself, and it occurs to me that the person that shot that video with their phone could have just as well have had an AR-15 and been well versed in the use of it, and could have easily popped off every single one of those assailants. Instead, they're now still roaming the streets, and can be terrorizing people over and over and over and over again. Now that may sound like a lot of violence, but remember that the criminals always have guns, and this is something that some people don't understand. A lot of times public opinion isn't right. And this hits home in Ecuador because, again, we have family there. The president recently was being criticized by no less than a lot of the foreigners even for wanting to allow citizens to defend themselves. Moving on. In Nicaragua, speaking of the similar issues, the retire abroad media is still gleefully, I'd say gleefully, promoting Nicaragua as this wonderful, you have to know Nicaragua is like they say it's cheaper than Panama. Duh, Panama is the most expensive place in Latin America, or at least in the top 3. It's like saying it's cheaper than New York. Move here in USA because it's cheaper than Los Angeles. Really? So is everything else. And anyway, I won't spend too much time on that, but just to say that they are still gleefully promoting Nicaragua, even as the current administration is shutting down churches, taking their lands, taking their bank accounts, and they also did this to the Red Cross. So this is not it's not what you think. Last year they attacked the Red Cross. They basically are attacking institutions one by one, and so basically they're doing the communist thing. And so one by one they're attacking institutions. First the Red Cross, now the Catholic Church, and who knows what the next institution is going to be. And so they're applying violence just to say communism, while the retire abroad media is gleefully, and of course human rights.
Retire abroad media is gleefully what?
The retire abroad media is gleefully promoting this as some sort of paradise because it's cheaper than Panama. And nowhere to be seen is what's actually happening on the ground to the people. They're being, the communism that is being perpetrated on the institutions and the people. And in matter of fact, the retire abroad media is actually portraying the administration as capitalism friendly and not communist, while in fact the exact opposite is true. It's just like portraying the president of Ecuador as some form of capitalist friendly, because if you may not recall, last year he lowered the taxes on toilet paper, while in the meantime out the back door they've got all these agreements with China, and they're rolling out their 15-minute cities, Chinese communism, with the cameras everywhere and electronic borders. They're not national borders, they're like city borders, like where you would just on streets. They've got like electronic plate readers and
Really?
this kind of thing. The electronic 15-minute city communism that they're rolling out, funded by China, all the while being portrayed as someone that's, capitalist or business friendly.
Okay.
And so while the Nicaragua administration is shutting down churches and stealing their bank accounts and their property, somebody should tell them about Bitcoin. And this is the thing that happened in Canada, where the truckers had to sit there. Why do people seem to have to go through something themselves? By the time you get through a whole population of people, there's too much damage already done. We need to learn to see the writing on the wall and listen to videos and people that aren't very popular and confirm, is what they're saying correct, instead of, people just kind of brush things off. But that's human nature for you. All right, moving on. And moving on to the next whopper, I've got some good news for you. Imagine that. The president of Croatia declares the WHO a terrorist organization. It's about time that somebody had the steel shot to do such a thing, as some people would say, call a spade a spade. Yeah, now all we need is other countries to do the same thing. And incidentally, not to leave out the USA, the U.S. Immigration Department is under the WHO. They're the ones directing and controlling what the USCIS does.
Very interesting.
As you know, we report on U.S. immigration issues as well as a lot of things that are also happening abroad. They also seem to be under the thumb of the WHO. And of course, for people that are wanting to enter the USA legally, and especially for family reunification, this is to say, your neighbors, your friends, your compatriots, your church members, all of those people that you consider that your compatriots, Americans just like you, that need to reunite with their long-term spouses, not just distant family or third cousins. I'm talking about their marriages and their children and their grandchildren are still waiting years in order to be reunited because the Immigration Department can't seem to get things straight about where their priorities lie with family reunification. And of course, people within the WHO themselves, et al., have stated that they will break up families anyway under their communist takeovers. And so I don't see how that's really a priority for the WHO, which is now controlling the Immigration Department of the USA. Anyway, thanks for coming to the video. Let me know your comments on all of the above and have a wonderful day.